Welcome to The Explainer. We're about to break down the story of a guy who started out selling books from his garage and is now literally launching rockets into space. Yeah, we're talking about Jeff Bezos.
So really, how does that happen? How does a man who started an online bookstore end up as a leader in AI, biotechnology, and even space exploration? You might think it's a huge leap, but as we're about to see, the path he took, well, it's a lot more direct and calculated than you'd imagine.
Yeah. When you hear Bezos, you probably think Amazon, right? The everything store. But since he stepped down as CEO, his focus has shifted, to put it mildly. We're talking about much grander projects now. Things like using cutting-edge AI and biotech to help us live longer, and building the actual infrastructure to, live on other planets.
Subscribe to Scion for more fascinating, insightful, and wealthy stories.
Handle on the futurist he is today, we've got to rewind, go way back. Because the blueprint for all these huge ambitions, it wasn't drawn up in some fancy boardroom. Nope, the seeds were planted a long, long time ago.
I mean, from a super young age, Bezos was just wired differently. He had this incredible knack for mechanics and science. We're talking toddler-level stuff. He literally dismantled his own crib with a screwdriver. As a kid, he turned his parents' garage into his personal science lab. And this passion for figuring out how things work just grew and grew, right? Through high school and then at Princeton, where he wasn't just studying computer science, he was actually the president of a student group for, you guessed it, space exploration.
And get this quote is from his high school graduation speech back in 1982. He talked about getting people off the Earth so it could be turned into a huge national park. Think about that for a second. This wasn't just some teenage daydream. This was the mission statement, the core idea that decades later would become his actual aerospace company, Blue Origin. The vision was there from the very beginning. Okay, so you have this huge early vision. But a vision like that needs an engine, right? Something with serious horsepower to make it a reality. And that engine, as we all know, was Amazon. But the reason he started it is what's really key here. It shows you just how analytical he is when he sees an opportunity. 2,300%. That's the number. That's the number that changed everything. See, back in 1994, he was working at a hedge fund, and he saw this statistic. Web usage was growing 2,300% a year. He saw that number and just knew he had to get in on that. He couldn't ignore it. So what does he do? He leaves a super secure, high-paying job on Wall Street to start an online bookstore in a garage. And he did it using what he calls his regret minimization framework. It's pretty simple, actually. He just pictured himself at 80 years old looking back. Would he regret leaving Wall Street? Nah. Would he regret missing out on the very beginning of the internet? Oh, absolutely. And just like that, Amazon was born. And here's the crucial thing to understand. Amazon was never just about selling books. It was a vehicle. The strategy was brilliant, really. You start with one thing, books, where having a huge online catalog is a massive advantage. Then you reinvest every single penny back into growth, just expand like crazy to dominate the market. From there, you branch out into music, electronics, you name it. But the real masterstroke? That was AWS, Amazon Web Services. They started renting out their own massive server infrastructure. That didn't just bring in insane profits, it also built the financial and technical engine he needed for those much, much bigger dreams.
Now, holding this whole thing together from the very beginning is a very specific philosophy. It's something he applies to literally every venture, whether it's selling stuff online or building rockets. You could almost call it the operating system for his ambition. He calls it the day one philosophy. He has this famous saying that day two is stasis, followed by irrelevance, followed by excruciating, painful decline, followed by death. So for him, it always has to be day one. And look, this isn't just some catchy slogan you put on a poster. It's a real framework for avoiding what happens to so many big companies. They get slow, they stop innovating. Day one forces you to stay hungry, to keep inventing, and to always, always be focused on the long game.
And you can see this day one thinking in everything he does. Take customer obsession. At Amazon, that meant inventing one-click shopping. At his space company, Blue Origin, it means being obsessed with safety and bringing down the cost for future customers. Or how about take risks? For Amazon, that meant not making a profit for years just to grow and dominate the market. For his biotech company, Altos Labs, it means pouring billions into the super risky but potentially world-changing field of anti-aging technology. Same principle, different playground.
So once you understand that day one philosophy is the blueprint, all of his current projects, they just click into place. They suddenly make perfect sense.
This isn't some weird career change. It's the ultimate expression of everything he's been doing all along.
When he stepped down as Amazon CEO, he said it was to have the time and energy for his other passions. And wow, what passions they are. We're talking Blue Origin's rockets, Altos Labs' anti-aging research, a $10 billion fund to fight climate change, and his venture capital firm that invests in other game-changing companies. See, these aren't just random hobbies. Every single one is a massive bet on an industry that could completely reshape our future. And the mission for Blue Origin, his space company? It brings the whole story full circle. It connects directly back to that high school speech about turning Earth into a national park. His goal is to move heavy industry off-world to preserve our planet. So for him, space isn't just about exploration. It's about using it as a resource to save our own home.
Now, a journey like this, from a garage to the galaxy, it's going to change how people see you, right? And his public image has definitely transformed from that of a kind of quirky tech nerd to something much, much bigger. Back in the early 2000s, people pretty much saw him as this brilliant, but maybe a little awkward founder. The guy with the famous laugh who built an amazing website. You know, the classic data-obsessed tech nerd.
But over time, as his wealth and his influence just exploded to historic levels, that perception really began to shift. With that kind of power comes a ton of scrutiny, right? And the public image changed. He became this brilliant but mysterious and cold-blooded corporate titan, as the New York Times put it. Almost like a mythological figure who's actively shaping the world we live in.
So when you look at the whole story, it's actually incredibly consistent. It's a vision he's had for decades. The kid who dreamed of building colonies in space knew he first had to build a massive engine on Earth to pay for it. And that leaves us with a pretty big question, doesn't it? What does it really mean for the rest of us when one person's lifelong blueprint has the power to shape not just our planet, but our future in space?
Subscribe to Scion for more fascinating, insightful, and wealthy stories.